Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Astro Alchemy. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with Laura, and we're your hosts for our weekly show where we talk about the transits of the sun through the specific gate in human design, and then also the gene key that the sun's moving through, which switches every 6 days. And then we also touch on the current transits of the moment. So this week we're going to be touching on the ninth gene key, the ninth gate in human design. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Sagittarius season. We're going to be talking about what we're having right now is a Mars in Gemini opposite Venus and Mercury in Sagittarius. So it's a very mutable energy going on, and we'll dive a little bit more deeply into that, as well as a few other things. Today is Wednesday, November 30th. It is 3:42 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:42 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I think, one more thing, if you haven't yet, feel free to like and subscribe if we're on your fractal, if we resonate, if you come back each week to see what's going on astrologically and in the stars. And yeah, if you have anything that you want to share with us or you want us to cover, please feel free to comment. And if you're interested in getting readings, you can look below the video and you'll see all of our contact info. So other than that, I think we could probably pull up the human design chart of the moment, unless you have something else to add, Laura.
On the topic of readings, my entire shop is 50% off for the month of December because it's my birthday month. Yay. So tell me happy birthday in the comments below. Do it. But also, it is a 3 of Hearts day in Cardology, and Sarah was bringing up that that's a very rare day. These are only 2 days in the year that we have a 3 of Hearts, and only 1 day of the year next month in which we have a 2 of Hearts and an Ace of Hearts. So Sarah, want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, actually I do, because I've been thinking about it a lot. And so the way that it works is that the days cycle through. Starting in January 1st is the King of Spades, and then it goes from spades to diamonds to clubs to hearts. And there's 52 cards in the deck. There's only 28 to 31 days in the month. And so each month that cycle starts over, except it moves down to cards. And so the first day of January 1st, the King of Spades. The first day of February is the Jack of Spades. And then the first day of March is the 9 of Spades. And so slowly we filter out of starting from the very beginning of the spades to basically getting towards the hearts. And so we don't actually even get into hearts at all, where we're having days that are hearts, until July. And then actually, no, it's June 30th is the first King of Hearts day. And then from June all the way until the end of the year, we have hearts active, and hearts just have to do with feelings. And I feel like hearts just have to do with like the essential, in a sense, like the essential feelings, like kind of like the feelings that everything else spring from. It's like we get inspired by beauty, and like that inspiration is what allows us to kind of get through the more like kind of intense spade season, and the more intense diamond season and club season, which has a lot more to do with like tilling the soil and doing the work and showing up in a mundane way, and like the mental exertion as well. And so I feel like hearts are so special because it's almost like all of that other stuff is like in service almost to the hearts. At least that's how I've conceived of it. And yeah, like Laura said, we only have the 3 of Hearts in November and December, and we only have the Ace of Hearts and the 2 of Hearts in December. And so there are certain days of the year that, basically like the energy in them, as far as cardology goes, is very rare. And I think the 3 of Hearts, there's this this kind of yearning for a specific feeling that I think is associated with the 3 of Hearts, where the 3 always has kind of like an overabundance of energy. It's like this overabundance of energy when it comes to the feeling function. And we can think about the feeling function too, I think, in terms of water, for like the astrological elements. And so just thinking about what are the essential like desires that you have that you're really that the rest of your life is kind of in service to. And how do we, make that something that we remember every day of the year, not just when our feelings are inflamed or our feelings are inspired by something that's beautiful or really poignant or that touches our heart. So yeah, I was thinking about that. So thanks for bringing it up. I don't really talk about the cards that much, but I feel like for the next few weeks, I probably will be. Because the other thing too, that during heart season, it does feel like we're almost like free of some of the ties that like bind us to the material world. And it's like, we're more likely to let our feelings take us places that like our more logical, grounded selves wouldn't go. But okay, yes. That's good.
We throw a caution to the wind and are frolicking with reckless abandon to a certain degree, which makes sense with like New Year's Eve and the things people do. So it makes sense that, New Year's is.
And the holidays, it's like everybody just eating, and like, just like, they're just like, this feels good to eat this, like, and that's what they're, they're not worried about it. They're like, I don't have to wear a bikini. I do. I'm in Florida, but like most people don't.
But like thinking about human beings historically, like we eat when there's food, right? And so like around harvest season, September, October, as we get towards the winter, like you start storing food, but like when there's an abundance of food, you pack it on. I mean, not for bikini season, but you pack it on because you don't know what you're gonna have in the winter. You don't know what animals you're gonna hunt and find. And so like there's this, I mean, this is even before we get into heart season, but I guess like when heart season sort of begins to start in summer. But there's this, reckless abandon with ingesting things to protect ourselves from the impending death that may or may not come when we no longer have heart season in January, February, March. So it makes sense, but that's okay.
It does. Reckless abandon is a great way to describe the hearts.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay, let's get into sharing. This is the Gene Keys chart for the moment. It's geneticmatrix.com. Hi, Spotify. I always try to remember to shout you guys out. There's like 7 of you or something that are consistently listening. So, hey, you guys are cool. Thanks for listening. Obviously, the gate, as Sarah said, the sun is in gate 9. The gate is in sun 9. The sun is in gate 9, which happens to be my life's purpose in human design. I mean, Gene Keys perspective, my personality sun from the Gene Key human design perspective. I can talk today, I think. We'll see. I.e., it's my birthday tomorrow. And the name of gate 9 is the taming power of the small. What's the Gene Key, the I Ching name? Same taming power of the small. It's interesting because there's also the taming power of the great, which is gate 26, which is active right now with Venus and Mercury conjunct there in gate 26. And so we'll talk about that in 2 weeks' time when the sun moves there. But there's this link between 9 and 26 and the taming power. Another gate that has a similar name is the preponderance of the small, which is gate 17. And that's the gate of details versus 9 is the gate of focus. So potential can be fulfilled through detailed attention to all pertinent aspects. The gate of focus. It's in the sacral center, which is how generators get their generative life force when the sacral center is defined. Otherwise, the theme of an undefined sacral center is not knowing when enough is enough. It's in logical circuitry. It's a format energy too. It's part of a format channel, which is rather important. I thought I would like take notes before I began on like all the things, because there's a lot of things within this gate and I forgot to take notes. So that's okay. We're going to go off the cuff and see what happens. We'll start with it being a logical energy. No, we won't. We'll start with it being a format energy. So between the root and the sacral center, we have 3 channels, 53, 42, 63, and 52, 9. Those 3 are format channels, and they format energy and how our energy functions and works. And if you have any of these gates, not the whole channel, but any of the gates in your design, then that kind of overrides and like puts a shadow of emphasis on the rest of your chart and brings prominence of focus to all your other either logical, abstract, or individual energies. And so 9 being logical, and me having 9 kind of puts an emphasis on all my logical gates, which if you haven't noticed, I like logic. But anyways, 952 is the root pressure that fuels the sacral for the logical process. And 52, which is the harmonic to the 9, it's in Cancer. It deals with the energy to concentrate, the energy to be still, so that one can use their energy to focus on all the little details. And then in that focusing on all the little details, we build that logical process and put in the work, put in the effort to see what works and what doesn't work, to test out the patterns, to come to logical conclusions about what is correct for the entire collective or what should be enforced within the collective. And so this gate 9, Ra-Uru, who the founder of human design, has talked about it being a very generator channel in and of itself, because generators are here to build. They're here to work consistently towards goals or towards whatever it is that's correct for them. And 9 has this capacity to focus on the individual steps to get to wherever it is, can't talk, that they are going, or that their process is going towards which the process is going. Let's not end our sentences with prepositions. And so that energy moves across the sacral into the 515, continuing on in the logical process. But anyways, if you have this gate or this gate being defined, just brings an emphasis to all the logical energies that are currently active. And the logical process, like I said, is, you know, testing out patterns to see what's true and what's not true. And it has been a fun theme this past week for me, at least. Told Sarah I've been heavily into Byron Katie and her book Loving What Is, and her process of inquiry. It's very logical. It's picking apart the mind in a very logical, focused way. And I feel like gate 9 being active has been contributing towards that capacity. The programming partner or opposition of gate 9 is 16, again, also in the logical circuitry, but in the throat center, and that is the gate of skills. But we can read this little piece for you to see. Currently, we're in a line 4 day. To see the themes of it being in line 4. So regardless of the pressures or stress, the disciplined attention to detail, moon in exaltation, right action that leads inevitably to actualization, the power to act on the potential of the focus. Mars in detriment, the persistent urge to want to skip essential steps, the drive for action that ignores the details. And then I'm just going to bring this up for you guys. You can pause if you want to read all the lines here. 3, 2, 1. Okay, just so you can see all the others. If you do look at them, the bottom 3, are they more negative? 1 seems pretty nice, line 1, and then 2 and 3, misery loves company, the straw that breaks the camel's back. Those are slightly more quote unquote negative. Won't say it's negative, but a bit more heavy in energetics. And then 4, 5, 6 seem okay. Going back to this, currently we have 2644 active. I kind of lied to you guys last week. I realized when I talked about the nodes moving out of gates 1 and 2, which happened on November 27th, I said we're moving out of melancholic energy, woohoo! I lied. One of the nodes is still in melancholic energy, the north node in gate 44. South node is in, 24. South node is in 44, which is tribal, so that's out of the melancholic sludge. But the north node in 24 is continuously in melancholic energy, and so that's going to be active for about 2.5 months. So sorry for giving y'all false hope. It was not my intention, but because of the node, the south node being in 44 and Mercury and Venus being in 26, we currently have this channel of transmission, the channel of the transmitter, active between 44 and 26, giving us splenic and ego definition. So take from that what you will, whether you have those centers defined or undefined. You might be behaving differently this week from that. Anything else? Oh yes, mental notes. Sorry, going on a roll here. 9 and 16 are, part of that logical process, and that has been a huge conditioning agent for all of humanity for the past 400 years, since 1615. If you are into potentially what may happen in 2027, the precession of the equinoxes will change gears, and the gates that are rising on the horizon at the time of the equinoxes and solstices will shift at sunrise when the sun is rising on those horizons. It's hard to explain it. Like, look at precession of the equinoxes in like age of Aquarius, and you'll go down those rabbit holes. But currently we've been in the cross of planning with 9, 16, 40, 37, and that has been conditioning all of humanity for the past 400 years, mostly through 40, 37 and the energy of bargains and making deals and focusing on agreements that we have with one another. Like, you go to the grocery store, you can use currency, and in exchange for that currency, you can buy fruit and vegetables and whatnot. Or you can go to the doctor and you trust that the doctor will take care of you and your insurance will take care of it, and things are secure and in place. 9 and 16 are a part of that. 9 is like the life force ability to focus on all the things that have to get done, and 16 is part of the skills that go into improving the collective. When Ra talks about this particular cross, I think he talks about like the irrigation system in not ancient London, but in older London, how London was organized, and they had poor water infrastructure with the plumbing, and then like some guy came in and decided to revamp the whole city. He implemented his skills with gate 16 and his focus, made bargains with the city to change the infrastructure so that London has better plumbing, things like that. Focusing on the tribe and the collective to improve society, and trusting that once those agreements are in place, that they're going to be maintained and we can rely on them. And then in 2027, the background frequency is going to change, and we might not be able to rely so heavily on all these predetermined agreements that we have with one another within society and the collective. So 9, 16, 9 and 16 are both part of that cross of planning that has been in place for 400 years. That is crumbling slowly, as you can clearly see by the way society is struggling to uphold whatever it has been upholding for the last many decades. Anything else? Is there anything you want to talk about in the human design side from gate 9?
I think you did a really good job explaining all of that. As far as, there's certain things that I want to touch on, because I think that there has been like a bit of a seed change, even though, we were talking about moving out of melancholy, and we're still half nodally in melancholy gates or melancholic gates. Like the moving from the 1-2 to the 24-44 is it's like a thing, And I think it's interesting too, because within a few weeks was it that the 61 that we moved out of the 61, and then a few weeks later we have now a consistent access in a sense to the 24. And so it was there's this little flip switch almost between that channel. And I just noticed that because for me, this gives me now I have full on closed head definition, since I have the 61, and the 24 is giving me that. So I feel like it's, I'm far happier with this energy than what we were in before, just as far as my personal preferences go. Not that anyone really cares. I'd be interested to see how everyone else has felt like that, because you said it was the 27th that it switched from the 1-2 until. So yeah, that's another thing for me to look at. I've had a really big shift in energy. I can see it, the way that I'm seeing things, the way that I'm perceiving things is different. And I wonder if it's not that, or if it's moving out of the 34, or what exactly it is. The other interesting thing to note, and we'll talk about this more later, is the 45-26, are they
Mars Venus opposition?
That's the Mars Venus opposition. So we'll talk about that with the Mars Venus opposition, but interesting energies that are polarizing, right? Because I have 45 natally, and the 45 has to do, and so does Lora actually, and that has to do with basically knowing how to delegate, basically being the queen who knows how to oversee and what to do with all of the things that all of the material resources that a tribe has. Whereas the 26 is, it has to do with sales. Well, Laura, you could probably say it a lot better than I did, but like in a sense, it is associated with that, the 2644 in general. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about it more with the Venus Mars opposition, but I'm just wondering like how that's going to color the energy, the fact that those are the planets and those are the gates. So we'll talk more about it later, but those are the things that I'm paying attention to right now.
And they're relevant. So yeah, it's exciting. Lots of fun energy, sort of. Depends on your definition of fun. I think everything astrological is fun, whether it's pleasant to experience or not. It's still fun to like watch and observe. But yeah, I guess we can go back to the human design of 45 and 26 later, and move into the gene key of 9. Just FYI, right now, as we're recording, 63 is defined by the moon, and I think that's hilarious because 63 is part of that logical circuit that we have defined right now. So it's adding to the fun. But the gene key shadow is inertia, the gift is determination, and the city is invincibility. And it's the power of the infinitesimal, again, with the programming partner 16, indifference, versatility, and mastery. It's part of the codon ring of light, which is the Promethean godhead. We didn't talk about Prometheus, maybe I will. But 9, 5, 26, and 11, all together in that same chunk of Sagittarius. They're all consecutive gates. 5 degrees to 11 degrees Sagittarius. And the 2 shadow sides of this gate are reluctant and diverted. And it's part of the channel of stability, channel of focus. 952, channel of concentration. I always forget the channel names. Don't quote me on that. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to talk about my personal experience with this gene key to start, before we get into what Richard Rudd says about it. So this is like my gateway into gene keys, which makes sense. You know, your personality sun is the position that maybe I'll not stop sharing. Well, okay, pause if you want to continue looking at this screen, but unpause because I'm going to stop sharing. But this particular gate was my entry point into gene keys. And I don't say that just because, you know, we are most conditioned by our personality sun gate. Yes, it's true. But when I first joined the human design groups on Facebook, which I recommend you find and join because there's so many free resources there if you want to know more, and I'm sure whether or not you want to invest money into learning a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of free materials. Sorry, people who charge for this stuff. Anyways, probably shouldn't say that on the internet, but anyways, people would talk about gene keys. And my mind would always be like, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to pay attention to that. That's incorrect. Don't care about gene keys. Whatever. And so for several years, as I began studying human design, that was my response to gene keys. And then one day, as we all do, I had an epiphany in the shower. Again, like we all have our deep prophetic thoughts that come to us when water is pouring down over our shoulders. But it was like a twofold, 2 different analogies for why humans fail in general and how we are self-sabotaging. And one was like we set ourselves up for failure because when we think about our goals and where we want to get to in life, we assume we have to jump from point A to point B as if we're playing hopscotch, but it's like Olympic long jumping. And we have to jump, I don't know, 20 feet. I don't know how far people jump in the Olympics, but we have these far-fetched goals, obviously Sagittarius, that we want to achieve. And we want to just do it in one shot without really trying and doing all the hustle and bustle to make it happen. We just want to leap because we're so excited about this thing that we want to accomplish that we go for it. And we can't jump that far. And like if we're in a state of inertia, if we're not moving and we don't have momentum to jump, if you're just standing still and you try jumping 20 feet, you are going to fail. If you actually try to get that far and you like squat low enough to try to make sure that you can do it, you're probably going to knock yourself off balance and fall and get hurt. And then you're going to think, wow, this was a huge failure. There is no point in me trying to achieve this goal. It's obviously not for me. It's like, hey, I tried, I failed. I'm not cut out for this. I'm going to move on and leave it in the past. We self-sabotage and we say, okay, look, I tried, I failed. It's not for me. And then we give up on our dreams. But really, the only way you can actually get to that point is if you like start with momentum, You have to start walking, and you need momentum if you're actually going to jump. For the most part, like, you can just walk. You don't have to jump. And we think we hold on to these goals and dreams that we have, and we picture the ideal of what everything is going to look like when it happens. And we forget about all the little in-between stuffs that are part of the journey. And so we forget that we can just simply walk to get from point A to point B. We don't have to fall. We don't have to get hurt. Like, it's not fun. It's not fun walking. It's a lot funner, more fun to try to like jump and see how far we can go playing hopscotch or something. But that's not the most practical and efficient way to actually accomplish our dreams and our goals. So that was one part. Just read the chapter and you'll see basically that's what Richard Rudd says. But part 2 was this visualization of like either Tom and Jerry or the Roadrunner and the Coyote, and whoever was like the bad guy somehow is like chasing after what he wanted, and he gets caught in his, mental perception of where he's going, and he ends up going in a circle. And if you imagine Tom the cat, or right, Tom's the cat, or the coyote, or whoever who's running in a circle, or the Roadrunner, I don't know, that in the cartoon image, if you imagine them spinning faster and faster and faster in the circle that they're going in, you can imagine like the floor slowly beginning to sink under them as they're carving away and embossing themselves into the ground, creating like this little donut hole in the ground of how they're running. And so they go and they go and they go, and they don't realize what they're doing to themselves. And then finally, when they stop the whole like momentum that they have, they realize they're 12 feet underground without a ladder to pull themselves out of the mess that they've dug for themselves, because they were so caught up in doing what they were doing, spinning in that circle or running in that circle or oval or whatever it was. And so there is that other part of self-sabotage of like, our habits rule us. We get caught up in what we're doing and think it's correct, and we get into our patterns, and we don't realize that they're actually detrimental to ourselves. And then we have to climb up out of the hole that we've dug for ourselves. Anyways, bring back Gene Keys and Gate 9 in the chapter. I think it's within the book and not the audio contemplation, but Richard Rudd talks about walking in a circle and how we have these circles that are engraved in our lives. And in order to break free from that, we have to take the first step off away from the pattern that we've been walking in. I haven't read it in a while, so it's not fresh in my mind, but Sarah recently read it, so maybe she can elaborate on that analogy. But anyways, I had these analogies in the shower, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so brilliant, yada, yada, yada. And then later that day, I go check my computer, and I see in one of the Facebook posts, someone commented about Gene Keys. And that was the moment I was like, you know what? I'm going to see what this Gene Keys is all about. So I click on it, and then I get to the website, and then I get to the free audio contemplation, and then I hear Richard Rudd talking about all this stuff. I'm like, I'm pretty sure like it's verbatim. Everything I've already thought in my own head an hour earlier is now being repeated back to me in this like magical way. And so it was a very magical experience of being brought into Gene Keys. And then that let me know that this is correct, right? Going into this path, because there's a lot of information if you want to get into it. But for me, that was my magical little entry point. But that's a long story. Anyways, inertia. Richard Rudd talks about how the dilemma of inertia, like the way you get out of inertia is by having willpower. You have to decide that what you're doing is not right, and you need to take the first step. Because when you're inert, when you're not moving, just like in my analogy with jumping, you're completely at a standstill. And we think that in order to move out of inertia, we have to take this great big leap of faith and just really just go for it and just do the crazy thing that we think is going to actually make us happy. But really, the only thing necessary to like start moving is taking that first little itty bitty baby step that's going to create inertia, create momentum, so that you're no longer stuck in the position that you already are in. So that was big aha moment when I saw that. But this idea that you need willpower is a big theme within the shadow, because somehow you have to get moving. Something has to change internally within the shadow state for you to find the momentum to actually make that change and make it happen. And then this has been, being my life's work, a great detrimental force in my life, because I'm often inert. I'm often just not doing anything and not reaching towards the goals and dreams that I have. And then something that appeases my mind is knowing that strategy and authority. When something's correct, the body will move. Like, you don't have to decide that it's going to happen. Willpower exists in the body and not in the mind. And the mind trying to force something to happen will probably take it into that little spiral of doing the wrong thing, getting caught up in the patterns that are not going to be correct for you. And so you have to trust the body and trust that when the body moves and does whatever it needs to do, it will get you wherever it is that you need to go. So that's been helpful, but I need water. Sarah, you talk, please. I'll take a break.
No, I mean, there are so many good things there. You know, just to talk about Samskara, I mean, I like the way that you gave the what is it, the Wile E. Coyote analogy of just like spinning. And like, you can think of it too, like as like a bike or a car where you get stuck in mud and you kind of try to get yourself out, and the harder you pedal, the deeper you get. There's a lot of different ways to think about it. And I was thinking about it like with the grooves, right? Because those grooves, if they're made correctly from like what you could call like your individuated, like divine, like self, then they're really powerful. But like if they're wrong, they're also really powerful. And so I think about how sometimes we all tend to get into these types of grooves. It's not just people with the 9, although people with the 9 may be like specialized in it in a way. But I think that, you know, there's sometimes we can think that we're getting out of them, where really we're just like in them, and we're kind of like making a little bit of like out external channels that are like, they're like tangential to the initial groove that we're in. And it's like our way of like using, I guess, the mind to make us think that we're getting out of it, even though we're still in it. And so like, I feel like there's many different layers of like this, like inertia, right? Because on the one hand, there's the like the kind of the deepest level of inertia that, you know, is like the deepest groove that gets stuck when you're stuck. And then there's the little ways that we like trick ourselves into thinking that we're getting out of it, when really we're just repeating and staying like kind of in the same pattern. So that was something that I thought of when he was talking about and just like the power behind it is really interesting, although that's not, I mean, it's part of the shadow, but it's also part of the gift, because it has to do with determination. Some other things that I just pulled out from the chapter, you know, it's interesting where like this particular gene key and also gate, but it has to do with details, right? And so it's like being able to discern what details you're kind of just using because you're addicted to what Richard Rudd calls trivia, versus what details are like inherent and essential to the like your particular path. And so there's that, you know, that's a discernment, or that's like a differential then like that each person has to kind of decide on their own. But with the 1156 channel that I have, Lora has it as well, you know, I can relate to that because there's so much information that I could constantly be distracting myself with. I could literally live in trivia for the rest of my life and like die in trivia. And so the discernment and like the kind of the commitment to discerning which part of the questions that you're asking are actually essential to you, I think is really important here too. And something nice about this key is that he says, you know, if you put your heart behind anything, like if you're like 100% like this is what it is, like you believe it, like you maybe like you decide that it's going to be true. It's like the determination that you get from it, which, you know, again, we're going into the gift here a little bit, but this is part of the shadow section, is like it's just a huge power. I mean, it's in the sacral center, so it's sacral life force energy that's really behind you. And then I don't know if you really touched too much on the repressive and the reactive nature, but the repressive nature is reluctant. And he says the reluctance is to move out of one's patterns, and it's not a conscious choice, but an inner dynamic where all of one's life force remains frozen. The reluctance is essentially a paralysis of our will brought about by following familiar repetitive patterns that do not serve us. And like, I wonder, because he uses the term will, right? And so like will for us, we think about will as in our will center, as in our ego. And so it's like, it seems as though, you know, Richard Rudd knew plenty about human design. I mean, it's based on human design. So it makes you wonder, like, you know, what part of our will, even if we don't have access to, if we're undefined, is still inherent to us being human in general. And like do we take ownership over, you know, like what's the part that's like ours versus what's the part that is us trying to be not self, right? And so that's something that I thought was interesting. He uses the term human will a few different times. So it's just like it was really like, for me, like I was just more curious about it, because I'm like, well, I don't have access to willpower consistently. So like I've kind of written off my own sense of willpower, because it's really hard. It's really easy to get into not self of trying to prove worthiness. And so it's like, but where is the line where you still do have your own sense of will, even if you're not necessarily in your not self? And like, where does that live? And that's a, you know, that's a question that I don't have the answer to, but it was something that this key brought up for me. And then the other side of it is the diverted. This is the reactive side. And this is about really just like unconsciously seeking any type of stimulus to draw some of the energy out of their body, which again feels like a lot like the 1156 in a way, where it's like constantly like trying to just absorb more and more stuff in order to do something, if anything, with their life force energy. So that's what I have for the shadow. Do you want to talk about the gift at all?
Yeah, but I'll bounce off some of the things you said. I don't know if it'll pertain to the gift, but if I can remember them. In terms of the fidgetiness, I think this is like one of the ADHD gates. It's not like Ross said this, but people have deduced that there's certain gates that kind of have this energy of ADHD, this need to be active, yet like not actually focused and concentrated on anything. Like I don't have a defined sacral. And so I have gate 9 that's hanging, and it's like my personality sun. And so I don't have 52 to consistently ground me and be able to present me the fixed energy to focus on whatever it is I'm focusing on. But something that I have, like similar to what you said with willpower, just because I have an undefined sacral doesn't mean I have no energy. Like sitting here talking requires energy. Existing requires energy. There is life force that is animating my body. And just because if you have an undefined sacral doesn't mean you have no energy. It's just how we've been conditioned to think that it's all or nothing. And really, we have inconsistent. It's not the same all the time every day. And it shows up in different ways for us. It's not reliable within us, but we still have it. And likewise with willpower, we don't all have consistent, rigid willpower that we can rely on within us, but it does come and go in different ways, perhaps with transits or with certain people being active, like as part of your aura in your life. If you spend time with someone who defines your willpower center, maybe with that person, you'll notice like, yeah, I can do it. And then when you leave the aura, it's less intense and active, but like it's still there and you still have access to it, albeit temporarily. So there's that sort of in response, because like me too, like I have an undefined willpower center, and maybe the focus for why he brings up the will is because 26 is the teeming power of the great, and they're both part of this godhead, the Promethean godhead, which maybe I will talk about, maybe I won't. We'll see how we're doing with timing, because there's a lot to say within that, but they're part of the same codon ring. So there's a similarity between, I mean, again, Sarah brings up the 1156. 11 is also part of the same codon ring. So there's linkage between 9 and 11. Also for the shadow, I wanted to bring up 16 because there's this little loop that the 9 gets into with the 16. The shadow for 16 is indifference, which is I don't care, couldn't be bothered. Like, I don't care what happens. I don't want to think about my excitement about anything. And so that perpetuates the inertia, because if you don't care, why would you want to do anything different than what you're already doing? And if you don't have the inertia, it further perpetuates the indifference. And so they kind of feed each other into a very unhealthy, endless loop, as I'm quite familiar with. And so, yeah, indifference is also a part of this inertia. But determination, I don't know, it's something that it's not, I feel like my relationship to determination is I notice it in hindsight. It's not like, yeah, I'm going to be determined. It happens or it doesn't happen. And then if it happens or if it doesn't happen, I can look back and be like, oh, look, it happened, or look, it didn't happen. But that's a very poor explanation of what it means to be determined. I feel like determination is the willpower coming in and saying, no, we're going to do it differently. No, we're going to take that first step. No, we're going to stop the pattern. We're going to pick our direction. We're going to have that heart that goes after whatever it is that we want, like Sarah was saying earlier. Sarah, you can talk about determination.
Determination.
Yeah. Do you have quotes?
Yeah, I have a couple. So one of the things they say about determination, and this is what I was saying before, that like the Sanskara, like that concept, which is I think a part of like more like a yogic philosophy. It's also really good because the power of the ninth gift is the power of repetition. So says Richard Rudd. And so like there's this like ability to like do things repeatedly and get so good at them that it's like, you're building like essentially like a really solid well that you can constantly draw things out of, as opposed to like a ditch that your car's stuck in, right? And so there's the difference between the potential for the shadow and the gift. The other thing he says is like, once you do center yourself in a groove and your course begins to feel more and more certain, your mind fully stops undermining you. And so it's like there's the potential here for like, once you're actually like, okay, like this is the right energy, this is how I'm supposed to be moving, like I've checked in with my magnetic monopole, I've made sure that my mind is in the trunk, I've I've done all of those things that like I need to do in order to feel good. And like then once you're in that groove, it's like you're in it, like you're riding the ride, like nobody's going to be able to take you off the ride. And so there's like a stick-to-itiveness or like an ability to like stay the course here, where other people may fall off course. It's like once you get in the groove, you're in the groove in a sense for the ninth gift.
And I just want to interrupt you and say that's so funny. You don't stick the mind in the trunk. The mind's the passenger. How could it enjoy the ride of the vehicle?
Sometimes it needs to go in the trunk.
You don't get to see anything.
Was I talking about that with you, about sometimes having to throw the mind in the trunk? Oh, that was somebody else. Okay, that's somebody else. I was like,
poor mind. I don't want my mind to be stuck in the trunk.
I was definitely talking to my friend Anna. Hi, Anna, if you're listening. But we were talking about it not in the human design perspective, but it's like sometimes you have to like, it's like trying to like totally sabotage, trying to take the wheel from the magnetic monopole to put it somewhere sometimes where it's going to shut up for a while. You know what I mean? Even though obviously that's like not the path of least resistance. Some of us are just more stubborn than others, or some of our egos and not selves are just a little bit more stubborn than others is all. The other thing about the gift is it's basically like the vast amount of power that can move through the smallest things. And I actually really do think about you, Lora, for this, because it's like and if anyone follows Lora on Instagram, it's Astrological low _ you can find it beneath. I'm not going to get it completely right, but if you do, like, she's like very talented at like literally just like placing stones and cards and different types of ritualistic items in areas like that make them look just like art. And that seems like, oh, like anyone can put rocks places, and it's like, no, they can't.
I think they can.
They absolutely, you think that you can, but like you don't, it's not quite as seemingly like alive when you just do it out, when it's not out of a place of deep intention, right? So that's something of that like ability to be like paying attention to the minutia. And he says somewhere in here, I'm probably gonna miss it because I don't know that I don't know that I wrote it down, but basically it's just like when you're able to, like, it's almost like like making every single thing that you do in life is like a ritual, is like with intention, is divine. and being aware of that, and like having that awareness, like it imbues all of the tiny little dumb things that everyone does every day and nobody thinks about with all of this magic. And so it's, there's a magical quality. It brings magic into the mundane, this particular key. And so I'm just going to bleed into the ninth, the city,
Well, you do. On that note of just like the consistency, what comes to mind is like how you just have a single drop of water fall on a rock or a boulder every single day, or not like one drop a day, but it's just a consistent, steady stream of just a drop. And eventually that drop will erode the rock and create a river, or it's going to create a fissure within the rock and the rock will break. But it's just one drop, and you don't think that one drop will like do anything significant, but when it's there constantly all the time, that's where the magic happens, where great change can happen. Kind of just like an analogy that came to my head. Maybe Richard already even talks about it, I don't know, but just to continue off. But go ahead with the city.
No, I think that's a good point. And it is, I mean, there's when you're doing things like that without being able to see an immediate result, it's really easy to give up, especially in our world where we think of everything as like wanting to have instant gratification. And when that's not available, like it's, for most people, they quit in like imbuing the mundane things with purpose or meaning or intention. But it is like, okay, that one drop of water that just dropped, like it feels like it's not doing anything, right? But then over time, obviously it is doing something. I think the only thing that I wanted to say with the city of invincibility is just that he talks about how the taming power of the small is like a laser that can pinpoint a very specific aspect of life, bringing enormous power to bear on that area. An ordinary person may find the aura of such a person almost unbearable, since it spotlights those aspects of your shadow nature that you most fear. And then it says, if you're blessed to be karmically tied to such a being, it is highly likely that full realization will occur within your lifetime. So I'm like, hey, Laura.
Well, I reach full realization.
No pressure, but if you can reach the city, then so will I. But yeah, there's something to just like bringing all of this, like just like this crazy amount of life force, like the smallest things, and it's like a laser. So I really liked how he talked about that. But I think that's it for me for the invincibility. Do you have, or the city, do you have anything that you want to say?
I'm not sure if it's city related, but something you said about like that first drop, looking at the format energies, the abstract energy starts with the pressure in 53, the individual circuitry begins with the root pressure 60, and then we have 52. So we have, and this is like the beginning of, because they're formatting energies, they're the beginning of like these three processes, I don't know how to pronounce that, but the abstract process begins with 53, which is the gate of beginnings. It's the pressure that says like, okay, we have the energy to start something new. And then with the logical side, it starts with 52 and 9, which is the energy to be able to focus and like pay attention to the details. So there is that theme of beginning, because like this isn't the end of the logical process. It's the very beginning. Like you got a long ways to go. So again, it repeats that lesson that it's not about the destination, it's about taking the first steps to get towards wherever it is that you're going, that are the most impactful and significant, because you can't begin a journey if you don't take the first step. Not to be super cliche, but in terms of invincibility, if I remember, there's like this pairing again with Gene Key 26, which is the city of invisibility, and there's this link between them. Don't know a better word than link, but connection maybe, of how when we're truly invincible, there's nothing that we can't do. If you think of what it means to be invincible, it means that anything that tries to penetrate you won't be able to, because there's this force field that's protecting you from any sort of harm. And I see that, like my guides are very gentle with me. Like there's like a little bubble. I think it's because I don't have any third line. I think 2 third lines in my chart. I have very minimal third line energy. So like my life path through this life is like very gentle, of like, I'm not gonna get bumps and bruises along the way, life is going to be very gentle with me. And I'm going to assume it's thanks to this theme of invincibility, that if I'm doing things right, then there's this protection mechanism that's going to prevent harm from coming my way. But yeah, I can't remember the precise thing that Richard Rudd said about invisibility and invincibility and how he links them together, but there's something there. And I don't know if it was in this chapter or if it was in chapter 26.
It was in this chapter because he says, oh, what does he say?
That's okay, we'll put it below. I don't know how long my camera is gonna last, my battery camera. What time did we start? Do you remember? Was it 12:15?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay, we'll share the quote later. We'll move on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, hold on. He says to be invincible is also to be invisible and vice versa. Invincibility means to dissolve into the will of the universe, and it is a city that has been deified in many different cultures. Archangel Michael holds the archetype of invincibility. So it's, you know, because you're dissolving into the will of the universe. That's why. So
there's
anyway,
where that will comes from. If you're questioning, where do I get that willpower? It's because the universe wills it. There you go. But we'll share the the screen for the astrology. Currently, Sun's in Sagittarius, it's in Pisces. Venus and Mercury are here at 20 degrees and 18 degrees Sagittarius. That's opposite Mars in 18. So this is the 26-45 opposition we were talking about. Yeah. 45 is here in Gemini, and 26 that invisibility city. What other things? Saturn is trining Mars and sextiling Venus. That's part of the mix. It's not quite yet, but the sun will be opposing Mars on December 8th. So like put that in your calendar if you want, or don't, whatever you want. But that's, I feel, an important day within Mars's whole retrograde through Gemini. But
isn't that also when the full moon is?
I don't know when the full moon is.
I'm fairly certain it's right around the 7th or the 8th. So that we're gonna have this, the moon is gonna be basically conjoined a retrograde Mars opposite the sun when that happens. That'll be interesting. I mean, yeah, there's a lot going on. I think the Mercury Venus conjoined Mars thing has been something that has been on my mind, and like I've been thinking a lot about polarity in the masculine and feminine, and like something that I realize is that, and this is going to sound probably very Sagittarius and Gemini, but it's like, you know, I have Mars in Gemini natally, and so this is a Mars return, because a Mars return for me, while it's also a Mars retrograde. I don't have it retrograde in Gemini. That's a conversation for another day though. But I feel as though, you know, there's so many different levels of perspective that I've been able to access throughout this Mercurial, Martial, Jupiterian, Venusian energy, where like sometimes like I'm like just so up close to my own trauma. It's like, I can't see anything beyond it. And then I take a step back and I'm like, well, there's other ways to look at things. And then I take a step back and I'm like, wow, if I look at things from all the way over here, like nothing really matters that much. And then I take like steps even further and I'm like, wow, this is how this person sees this thing. And like, you know, I start to be like, wow, I can see so many different perspectives as just my individual self that I never really felt like I had access to, because I was so, let's say, up my own ass about my own trauma, right? And a lot of us are like that. So I say that lovingly about myself. But that was, you know, something that I've been feeling very strongly within the mutable opposition, and specifically with the 45-26. I don't know how that relates exactly to the gene keys or the gates, because it doesn't seem like it's an obvious relationship. But those are the things that have been coming up for me. How about for you, Laura?
I really like how you said that, how if you take a step back and you can see it more, like you have to focus in on the details because you're living it, you know, you have to start somewhere in the Gemini, and then you can get that broader perspective. So I really like that. In terms of like Mars and Venus, it'll rule something different for all of your charts. For me, it rules my first house, seventh house axis, and my 2 and 8, 1, 7, and 2 and 8, 2 different axes. But I don't know. I'm not sure that it has presented itself in like a very clear, like this is what it is for you right now way. Maybe it'll do so as the days progress. Because I haven't noticed anything that's like very upfront and obvious. But in terms of gate 45, something that keeps coming to my mind is the fact that it's the spokesperson for the Wa. If we're looking at larger groups of people, there's one person that ends up being like the alpha of it and leading the whole group. If you think of like a classroom, there's one teacher. You can't have 6 different teachers teaching material. Like you have one teacher with a bunch of children or whatever it is, or like one manager with his employees. Like you have different little intimate groups within that construct. But if you have like 9 to 16 people, you have one person that's in charge, that's leading it all. And so 45 is that energy, and it's Mars. And so just thinking about it in terms of groups dynamics right now, and that being martial, perhaps there is some sort of like slight aggression or determination, goal-orientedness with Mars, not to like be like, haha, determination with this gene key, but more determination of like the Mars Aries sense, Aries, Ares, Ares, like the Roman god of war, of the very martial sense of like, let's take charge, let's figure things out, let's be determined and aggressive and blah, blah, blah. That is currently tinging group dynamics right now. And I feel like that is sort of relevant. But then in terms of tribal energy, it's also part of that tribal circuitry. I'm going to bring back the gene keys. I mean, human design, I keep mixing that up. So if we look at tribal circuitry, we have 4521, 2644, 3254, 1949, 3740. Like we have this loop, and then the loop connects to the throat through the 4521. We also have 5027, 596, but that's kind of separate. But like we have this main loop, and on one side we have like the emotional side, which deals with families and agreements with people we love, the energy of marriage with 1949, the energy of children, maybe of parents, 4037. And on the other side, it's more business oriented, with 5432 being ambition, 26 being marketing. It's the other side of group dynamics, or tribal dynamics. And so we have this activation in like the business year side. Business year is not a word, but the business year side of tribal energy. And then it's trying to get through the throat through 45. And so I don't know, I feel like there's this thematic, I don't work with people, I work by myself, but I don't really even work, this is it, with Sarah. So I can't speak from personal experience. But if you are in like some sort of corporate situation, or you work within a small business or whatever, I'm curious what your experience has been, because I feel like it's probably something going on here with 26 being a gate of manipulation. Like it can be good manipulation and it can be bad manipulation, but it's just an energy of manipulation and knowing who and what to manipulate. And that person in charge saying, okay, like this is what you have to do to manipulate the group. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's sort of a theme that's going on, but do I have personal experience? No, but that's okay. We can go back to the astrology if I can figure out how. Oh, there we go. Anything else, Sarah?
I mean, I think that I like that you said that, and something that so I like the teacher that I learned traditional astrology under, Adam Ellenboss, and he quotes James Hillman a lot, and he quotes a book called A Terrible Love of War. I purchased the book. I haven't finished the book, but in a bit of a like short synopsis, he talks about how like Venus or Aphrodite and Ares or Mars aren't that far apart, because if you love things, the things that you value, you're almost always willing to fight for them. Like if it's really truly something that you love and cherish and value, and the things that you fight for usually you love. So, or there's some kind of quality of that inherent to it. And so I think, with the Mars and Venus opposition, it's like, they're on two opposing sides, but they're really not at odds in a way. So it's like, how can we allow the polarity to exist and hold the tension of the opposition without it becoming like a, like me versus you kind of thing? Like, how can we be playful with it?
I think it's relevant to say that my Venus and Mars are opposite one another in my own chart. Don't know what you have to say about that, but I have Venus in Capricorn and Mars in Cancer, and so they do hold that polarity. But like you said, just because they're opposite of one another doesn't mean that they're fighting against one another.
Yeah, and I think there's a tension, right, that you have to hold of these two different things, but like at the same time, they're kind of like, it's almost like, they're like holding hands, right, in a way. And I don't say this with all planets, of course, like all planets have some similarities because they're part of the same, archetypal system in general. But yeah, I think that, and it's different because yours are in cardinal signs, of course. And I think the mutability, that adds like a quality of like playing devil's advocate almost, or like having fun like in debate just because or like playing like a specific role, like and doing it just because you can, but like not really being that serious about it, almost like just like being like the opposition because it's fun to like be in debate with someone that you enjoy debating. So that's what I've been thinking about for this. And yeah, I mean, the Sun opposite Mars is probably going to bring up certain things too to the forefront with the full moon, so more to come on that. But other than that, and Mars, actually, one quick thing is that September 27th, Mars also trine Saturn, so it's going to trine Saturn one more time after it goes direct. And so that's just, has there been any lessons around grounding your energy, or like delays in gratification in a sense that are showing up again, that maybe you learned a thing or two from, because
when
it
was
is
the date? September 27th. Okay, it's interesting.
Yeah,
really interesting. Yes, I can vouch for that. I agree. Yes, it's true.
Yeah, I agree too. I agree too. I saw it and I was just like, oh my Lanta, and I've been having like a real Saturn-y Mars return, to be sure. I mean, it's my Saturn return too, so they're happening simultaneously. But I've definitely learned a thing or two about my Mars and like what it, the qualities of Mars and Gemini, like when they're functioning in a way that's like helpful and beneficial, and like, let's say in their gift quality and not in their shadow, very different stuff. And so I've just been learning a lot about again, delayed gratification. And I think that's probably like the name of the game, because when Mars first went into Gemini, you guys, I was like and like I was just like, my whole brain exploded of like all of these ideas, and like I was like, I can't, how do I live with this, like, and other people that I was talking to, it was like there was a lot of just like back and forth like communication stuff. And like I feel like when the planet sits there for a while, it's like you start to get acclimated to it, to the point that you're actually able to like be like, okay, I'm discerning where this energy is coming from, and I can work with it, instead of it just like grabbing me. And so I think I've learned a lot this Mars return, this Mars in Gemini, about the nature of words and like what's worth saying, and like, do words really matter that much? Like, and when they, and is it necessary to always have to blow off steam by talking? And for Mars and Gemini, maybe in a sense, yes, but it's like, again, like going back to the 9 too, it's like discerning what it is that is really worth saying, and like to who you should say the things to, who gets specific messages, who can take it. Like that's more of the gift, is like in the discernment of understanding, like, okay, I can give this person this bit of information, but I can't give this other person it, and that's okay, and like I'm kind of wielding my sword in a way that like it's helping everybody that it is touching, instead of it being like just like blind swinging. So that's been a fun little lesson for me. But yeah.
On that note, though, it makes sense with Mars, especially being in gate 12, because that is, even though it's individual, it's a channel of openness and sharing, and it's knowing who to say what to. So it really is like you have your mutable experience your mutation inside of what you experience, and you want to talk about it with someone. And so it's like having the right person on the other side that's going to be receptive to your own mutation and what you intuited from whatever happened to you, compared to like now it's in 45. So the voice of 12 was I feel, and now with the voice of 45 it's I have or I have not. So it's a little different flavor, but yeah, totally.
It is, and yet the 12 is like the individual process of discernment, where the 45 is like the tribal process of it. And so it's like that discernment is just very present for this Mars retrograde, and we'll talk more about it when it changes signs again. But yeah, okay, I think, do you have anything else you want to add for the astrology?
I think I'm good. Oh, Neptune's going direct on December 3rd, but it's just Neptune. We don't care about him.
Yeah, he's been Neptunianing things, but we'll talk about that next week.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate your participation. Like Sarah said earlier, feel free to like or subscribe if it's right for you, or share it with a friend if you feel like it, whatever. And we'll catch you on the flip side next week as we talk about the sun moving through gate 5.
And happy birthday to Lora for tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.